You're listening to the Whole Hog Sports Podcast. And now, here's your host, Matt Jones.
Arkansas basketball back on the floor tonight. They'll play LSU. It's going to be an 8 o'clock tip-off on the SEC Network. Mike Morgan and Damian Fishback will be on the call. Razorbacks beat LSU earlier this year. Remember, that was the snow game at Bud Walton Arena where I don't know if they opened up the doors to the students, but there were a lot more students in the building because of some ticket transfers. People couldn't make it to the game. Really fun atmosphere. But LSU, they gave Arkansas a scare that night, and Arkansas had to come back from an 8-point deficit to win that game 85-81. LSU now 2-8 in the SEC, 14-9 overall. Arkansas still in the thick of this SEC race at 7-3 in the league. The Razorbacks 17-6 overall. Anthony Kristensen is in Baton Rouge, and he'll be at the Pete Maravich Assembly Center tonight for this game. Anthony, when you look back on the game a few weeks back at Bud Walton, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stands out to me from that game, outside of it being obviously the snow game in which my check engine light came on when I was on my way home, was I think the ball movement. And obviously Darius Acuff had a tremendous game that night. I think that was he had 31 points, 6 assists that game. But when you look back at that game, I think the biggest thing that I noticed, was the ball movement. 18 total assists, and it was pretty well spread out. Darius Acuff had 6, and then Malik Thomas had 3, Trevin Brazile had 1, Billy Richmond had 3, DJ Wagner had 2, Malik Ewan had 1. So it wasn't just that. I mean, obviously, a lot of it was that Darius Acuff had, his career high scoring. But then I thought the ball movement in general was really strong. And, that's something that John Calipari mentioned after the Mississippi State game on Saturday was the ball movement and how Arkansas, or how good Arkansas is when the ball is moving at a good clip. They're 7-0 when they have 20 or more assists this season. And, they have won those games by an average of, I believe it's 31 point something points. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I noticed from looking back on that game is just the assists and obviously Darius Acuff having the night he had.
You think about in that game, I was looking at this the other day just for comparison's sake. You had, let me back up, Carter Knox and DJ Wagner are both, it's doubtful still, right? That they're doubtful for this game?
As of the last, yes.
Okay,
yeah,
so
doubtful for this game.
Right, so I went back and I looked at what they did during that last game against LSU. DJ Wagner played 19 minutes, 7 points, 2 assists, and 1 steal. And then Carter Knox, he started that game, gave them 24 minutes. He had 5 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 turnover. What do you think their absence, assuming that they are not available to play tonight, what do you think that does to Arkansas?
I mean, it forces them to change some things up, right? I mean, I think we saw it a little bit with the Mississippi State game in which they were both out. Arkansas had some different lineup combinations that it hasn't had throughout the season. In particular, the one that, was the most noticeable was the 3 big lineup with Trevin Brazile, Malik Ewan, and Nick Pringle out on the floor. It was only a 2-minute and 35-second sample size, but, that's still something that they hadn't done, at all this season, and something that, they had to, I don't want to say they were forced into doing that because I know that they worked on it and practiced a little bit, but I guess it became more necessitized to do it. So I think that's the one thing that you kind of notice immediately is just kind of different lineup combinations, guys who, you haven't seen play together all that much. Malik Ewan and Nick Pringle played a little bit more together in that game than they had, in the entirety of SEC play, even without Trevin Brazile. So I think that's the first thing you notice. And then the other thing you notice is that, you need Isaiah Sealy to, come in and give you good minutes, which, he definitely did against Mississippi State. He had the 6 points, 3 blocks, so he still had the 3 fouls in the first half. So that's something that, for him, I think that's the biggest thing that he needs to clean up, just with regard to his own, personal game so he can stay on the floor more, especially in these situations. He and Billy Richmond, I think, both had 3 fouls in that game. And when you're shorthanded, without Carter Knox, without DJ Wagner, you definitely need you can't afford to have those foul troubles. So I think those are the biggest things that you notice. And I'm intrigued to see, if we see Billy Richmond run a little bit of point guard tonight, because last year they utilized him a little bit when Boogie Fland went down and DJ Wagner became the full-time point guard. So I think those are all kind of different things that one's one that you maybe could see, but then the other things I mentioned are definitely things that, we definitely noticed without Carter Knox and DJ Wagner in the game against Mississippi State. And I could see them, being a factor again tonight.
If you look back when they played earlier this year, and again, that's just a couple 3 weeks ago, but LSU, I think that was the game where they got DJ Thomas back, right? I mean, he had been hurt, and then he came back, and I remember John Calipari, or I think I'm remembering the right game, that he said, hey, they've got their guard back. They're going to be a lot better now moving forward. He hadn't really played since. I think he played against Alabama, and then he's been back on the sideline with a foot injury. I think he's out for this game tonight too. He had 15 points in that game. But what's LSU look like if they don't have him?
Not as good. It's really tough because he's such a dynamic player. He's so good, driving, and he's an effective 3-point shooter. Though you don't necessarily love to see him take those shots. He's a 30% shooter on the season from the perimeter, and I believe he's around a 35% 3-point shooter for his career. But he's a guy who can get the ball moving. He's a guy who can drive. He gets to the foul line. So it's a big loss for LSU with him not playing, in the game. So I think you're going to see, some Jalen Reese playing at the point guard or Max McKinnon playing point guard, which, both good players in their own right, but I don't think they have, the same qualities that Dayton Thomas has with regard to his passing ability and stuff like that. I see Max McKinnon more as a shooting guard than I do a point guard. And, he's their leading scorer without Dayton Thomas in the game. So I think you're definitely going to see McKinnon and Jalen Reese, I think, kind of split the point guard duties without Dayton Thomas in. And, maybe that slows the game down a little bit, with regard to, how LSU wants to play. Not that LSU is, a team that plays at some breakneck pace in general, but, I think that without Dayton Thomas in the game, you're going to see them try to slow it down a little bit more, mm-hmm. and try to get Max McKinnon some good looks, just because he is their best shooter. He's nearly a 40% 3-point shooter on high volume. He can get to the line as well. So I think he's a guy who will probably be the primary focus. Obviously, they're going to want to get Markel Sutton involved as well, but yeah, I would definitely say the biggest thing that you're going to notice without Dayton Thomas in the game is probably Jalen Reese and Max McKinnon playing the point guard, kind of splitting that role together.
You remember LSU had some success in the interior against Arkansas in that game a few weeks back. How does Arkansas defend against that? Because that felt like that was kind of the key to, at least early in that game, to LSU building the lead and then being able to maintain it, was some of the damage that they were able to do underneath.
I think some of that kind of comes, unfortunately, because, Dayton Thomas isn't going to be available. I thought he did a good job of, slicing and getting in or finding good looks for the bigs down low. So I think some of that is unfortunately kind of naturally lost because, you never want to see a guy, out injured, especially when it's a guy who's, already missed a lot of time this season. But I think some of that is going to have to come through Nick Pringle and Malik Ewan, some of Trevor Brazile as well. Whether we see that trio play together again, I think that's something that could, help in that department. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the big thing. And I think you have to guard the point of attack a little bit better. Obviously, like I said, not having Dayton Thomas for LSU is going to hurt them in that department. But I think, guarding the point of attack has been one area in which Arkansas has needed to improve, throughout the season. So I think those are kind of the big things that, you kind of need to see in order to, kind of cut down on those inside looks, just because, if you're not guarding the point of attack very well, you're going to create those looks, that your opposing point guard is going to find his guys down low. And, you need to be physical. You need to be aggressive when those guys get the ball inside. So whether or not that means, the 3 bigs or the 2 bigs are playing together, I think that's kind of, remains to be seen. But I think that's probably kind of where I look immediately when it comes to protecting the paint.
Hey, if you're looking for a quality leader in Northwest Arkansas or skilled craftsmanship, look at Bentonville Glass for all your glass market needs. You can come by and see them now at 507 South Main in Bentonville or online at bentonvilleglass.com. Bentonville Glass, serving its community since 1971. Still talking with Anthony Kristensen here. Razorback basketball against LSU tonight, 8 o'clock tip-off on the SEC Network. It's at the PMAC. This is not the most glamorous arena in the SEC. You've been there, right?
Come on now. Last year. I love a little roundhouse arena. I think it's a neat. I think it's a neat venue. The Mike the Tiger exhibit is like right outside.
Oh,
Last year I didn't get to see him. So this year I'm very hopeful that I get to see Mike.
Well, you just gotta wait. You just gotta wait a few minutes. Maybe bring like a raw steak with you, and it might get his attention. Yeah, that's really cool, actually. If you've never been to Baton Rouge and been on campus and seen the Tiger exhibit right there, it's like you got the track right here, and then the football stadium's over here, and the basketball arena's right here. The Shaquille O'Neal statue's right across the street from Mike the Tiger. It's a different kind of arena, though. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And I guess you could probably make this case about pretty much any arena, but it's different when you go in there. I don't know how to explain it. And, it's, you get in there on a Tuesday night, there's not a lot of people, you kind of have to make your own energy. And I think that goes for both sides, but I feel like I've seen on several occasions, Arkansas teams go in there, and maybe they're not as talented as this year's team, but they go in there on these midweek nights, and the game it's not what you think you're going to get. And maybe you get a little bit more of a fight out of LSU than you thought you were. I think even back to like the glory years, 94, Alex Dillard hits a three, I think, or Scotty Thurman hits a three at the end of regulation, then Dillard hits a three in overtime to win it. The next year, Darnell Robinson makes a free throw, and then Clint McDaniel steals the inbound pass and makes a shot with like a second left to beat LSU. But like even those teams went in there, and I feel like they had a lot more trouble with LSU. And that, I guess, like for 30-something years, that's been my recollection of Arkansas going down to Baton Rouge. Is it seems like it happens a lot more on midweek nights or on weeknights than it does on the weekends. And man, you gotta bring it. You gotta really kind of make your own energy in that building, because there's something about it that just seems to take it out of the road team sometimes.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it helps that it's the second year in a row that they've done an 8 p.m. Tuesday game. 8 p.m. Tuesday games stink.
Well, it could be like 9 o'clock at Vanderbilt last year.
Yeah, the 9 p.m. Vanderbilt tip last year was criminal. Yeah, that was ridiculous. But no, I think you're kind of right there. Obviously, I think Arkansas last year, if I remember the game correctly, got off to a slow start, which was kind of synonymous with Arkansas in early SEC play last season, and had to fight back, create its own momentum, and nearly did. I remember Boogie Fland almost willing them into that game last season. Obviously, came up a little bit short, but you're going into a game with and I think I mentioned this last time they played LSU, last month. LSU needs wins, right? I mean, you look at
they're desperate.
In SEC play, 2-8, and the two wins are South Carolina, which stinks, and Missouri, which I think I've said it like 700 times on this podcast, can't decide if it wants to be good or not. So it's desperate times for their postseason hopes. It doesn't look overly promising for LSU with regard to the NCAA tournament. But, we obviously saw last year that you can turn it around late and try to get in, as people who cover Arkansas. But, it's also a pretty desperate time for the staff there as well. Obviously, the athletics director at LSU kind of said if there's no NCAA tournament appearance, then they're probably going to have to reevaluate where they're headed with Matt McMahon, which is unfortunate because, you never want to see people lose their jobs or, be in the position to do so. But, it's a team, it's a staff, it's everything that's kind of coming in desperate. So you're going to probably see, that team kind of have you would expect that team to have the energy needed, especially with the last game being as close as it was, and frankly with how they lost to Georgia on Saturday. And that's a game that they probably, looking back on it, probably should have at least not lost by 12 points. And they had a big first half lead, and it's tough because you look at, I think it was a 15-point lead in the first half, and it looks like they're cruising, and then all of a sudden, that's a Georgia team that can hit you and hit you quick, and that's what happened. And obviously they lost, so they're desperate for a result. They've lost, I think it's 5 of 6 if I'm not mistaken, and obviously they're 2-8 in SEC play, so they need something. And so Arkansas is going to need to match that. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say their next 2 games are at Knoxville and Austin, so it doesn't get any easier for them. If they're going to win, I would think they would need to take advantage of an Arkansas team playing the second half of or the back half of a 2-game road trip. Kentucky, by the way, I was going to say the Kentucky game earlier this year where Kentucky beat LSU on the Leitner shot or the Leitner-like shot. That was another one. That was a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And they kind of, they lulled Kentucky to sleep, and Kentucky was able to come back and win that. It's just, again, it's a different kind of place to play if you've never been there. It's just, I don't know that there's another arena like it in the SEC.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Oklahoma's kind of got a similar build, if I'm not mistaken, kind of the roundhouse look. And I've got 2 more to check off the list. I've got Alabama and Florida to check off, and then I'll have gone to all 16 arenas, which is kind of
they're a little bit more
cool
they're a little bit more lively than LSU.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
But that'll be a cool little feather in my own cap when I check off the rest of the full conference, I guess. But yeah, it is a unique arena. I don't know. You go to all these different arenas. Sometimes they all kind of start to blend together. I like the unique ones. Like I love Memorial Gymnasium at Vanderbilt. So I enjoy the unique ones.
This is John Calipari's birthday, right? This is number 66 today, so he'll be coaching on his birthday.
I do know that, and I've planned on saying giving him a little happy birthday, I guess, words as he comes in for the press conference if they win, because I don't want it to be like I'm teasing them if they lose. So we'll see if I wish John Calipari a happy birthday or not. But
we'll be listening.
I am aware.
We'll be listening for that tonight. That yeah, drop in something so our listeners will know what they're doing. Hey, last one for you. What do you think the key is for Arkansas getting out of there with a win? Because this feels, Ethan and I talked about this yesterday. If you want to stay in the SEC race, you can't lose this game because there's other games that are coming up that are going to be losable. And you can't drop these. You're going to have to go off and win road games, and you don't want to lose a road game that, if all things else are equal, you ought to be winning. So what's the key for Arkansas to being able to get out of there tonight with a win?
I think there's a few. I think the first one that comes to mind immediately, assuming DJ Wagner and Carter Knox aren't able to go, is stay out of foul trouble, especially in the front court with Nick Pringle, Malik Ewan, and Trevin Brazile. I think that's the one that you look at, right away and say, you can't afford to get into foul trouble. And then I think the next one is, guarding the point of attack. Obviously, like we keep going back to, Dayton Thomas is not going to play in this game, but it's still been, an area that I think Arkansas has needed to improve upon throughout the season and guarding the point of attack. And I think that's going to be, something that kind of comes back to it. And then I think it also comes down to ball movement. It's like, John Calipari said it after the Mississippi State game. It's, when this team has, hit 20 assists or more, they're 7-0. So I think that's a huge, benchmark to reach. And you don't have to reach it. I know, they only had the 7 assists against Tennessee and won, but they're much better when the ball is moving, I guess, or much more consistent, I guess is the right way to put it. And they had 18 against LSU the last time they played. So I think the ball movement is probably, right up there with the other 2 that I mentioned. And I know you said, give you one key, but you know me, I can't limit myself.
You can't stop yourself. That's a good point that you make about the fouls, because you had so many players who played 38, 40 minutes the other day at Starkville. you could be having some tired legs, especially with it being, like we said, the back half of this road trip, and you get the right officiating crew, and that can, that maybe the wrong officiating crew is really the way to say that, and you could end up getting a lot of, a lot of fouls in this situation. So that'll be something for Arkansas to watch.
Yeah, I'm
Defensively.
thinking, yeah, also stay out of foul trouble for my own personal hopes because I would like to, 8 p.m. tip. Let's not have the whistle blow to stop the game, every 10 seconds. Let's get in, get out. I don't want to be in there until 1 a.m. Let's move.
Anthony, good stuff. Appreciate you being on. We'll read Anthony's coverage tonight at wholehogsports.com. Hey, I want to tell you a couple of things else on our website. Right now, we're in the middle of a 4-part series on Norm DeBrian's career as the Razorback baseball coach. The 1980s story is on the site today. Talked to Tom Pagnozzi, Bubba Carpenter, Doug Clark, who was the head coach, the assistant coach for Norm DeBrian at Arkansas for a lot of years, like 26 years. You can read that story on our site right now. 1990s will be online tomorrow. This is really kind of a fun, detailed, thorough look back at Norm DeBrian's career. So you can find that at wholehogsports.com. And then speaking of Bubba Carpenter, he's going to be here tomorrow. He's going to help us preview the Razorback baseball season. We're just a few days away from the season beginning down in Arlington with that game against Oklahoma State on Friday night. So hope you check back in tomorrow when Bubba's in studio with me. See you then. Have a good day.